and welcome back to the One Take Show. In this episode, we are in conversation with Mr. Chaitanya Ramachandran. Sir is Senior Legal Counsel for Asia Pacific region of Twitter, and he has also worked in multiple jurisdictions across the world. In this episode, he talks about his experience of working in those multiple jurisdictions, and then he talks about the conceptual understanding of technology law. What are the essential characteristics of technology law? What are the areas that are covered under technology law? What are the skills that are needed by any fresh aspirant entering into this world of technology law? And how we as law students can acquire those skills. This is a really wonderful episode, and I've had so much fun having this conversation with him. And I truly believe that anyone who listens to this entire conversation will really add a lot of value into their own life from this conversation itself. So if you like this episode, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you have any suggestions or feedbacks, write them down in the comment section. I would love to read them. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, this is Kaustubh Srivastav. Let's start the podcast. So welcome to the One Take Show. I am truly honored and so excited to have this opportunity to speak with you. I personally have been following your footsteps. I've been reading more and more about you as I researched for this episode, and I have been mind blown also to understand that there are so many opportunities and there are so many achievements that students like me and the ones who are going to watch this episode can actually look up to and try and follow. Thank you so much for this amazing opportunity and sitting down with me for this conversation.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Kaustubh, and it's a pleasure and a privilege to be on your show.
Thank you, sir. And as I speak about your experience in itself is so enriching, just reading about it is so enriching. I can only wonder when the viewers can actually hear about it from your own words. It would be so much, there would be so much value that would be added. So could you please tell me a little bit about your experience, as in how and what inspired you to get into law? What was the experience, initial stages, and how the things went about?
Sure. No, I'm very happy to speak about that. I've always been very interested in technology from a very early age. So for the longest time when I was in school, I was actually interested in becoming and in getting into technology, either by becoming an engineer or doing something else that's in a technical field. But as I got into senior school, so the 9th, 10th standard, I started learning more about the reality of the process of studying engineering in India, and the entrance exams, and how not only competitive but also how much luck seemed to be a factor in getting into a good engineering college. And this was around, I would say, the 9th and 10th standard.
Mm-hmm.
And around the same time, I had started becoming interested in perhaps not law strictly, but certainly law and policy issues. My 10th standard is when 9/11 happened. And soon after that, we had controversial laws being enacted in India at the time. I remember the most notable one from that period was the Prevention of Terrorism Ordinance,
Right.
which then became the Prevention of Terrorism Act.
Right.
And of course, that act was a short-lived one, fortunately. But at the time, I remember, in my generation, it seemed to be the first law which had direct and very significant potential consequences for civil liberties.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, through my parents, I've heard about in their generation, the equivalent laws during the 70s and so on. But I think for our generation, certainly for me, I think that the Prevention of Terrorism Act was the first time that I, as a school student, I started understanding the power of the state, and how we as citizens need to educate ourselves about developments like like acts like that. And so I think that was my the first time that I originally became interested in legal issues. I remember that very clearly. I am actually from a legal background. Both of my parents are litigating lawyers.
Okay.
So I did have the benefit of my parents being
Mm-hmm.
sources of information about what the profession actually entails.
Mm-hmm.
Um but despite the fact that I'm from a legal background, I've actually never really
Mm-hmm.
been inclined towards getting into litigation myself.
Right.
Um except for a few internships that I did, and just here and there being involved in litigation before I joined Twitter. Now at Twitter, I am definitely much more involved in litigation. Of course, I don't appear, but I manage our litigation portfolio. Um, so being from a legal background was helpful in the sense that when I started becoming interested in this career path, I had my parents, ready to share all of their experience and their journeys, even though I wasn't necessarily going to take the exact same path as them. So that's how I originally became interested in law, and then I started reading up about the law entrance exams. When I was in school, there were still individual entrance exams for each law school. So I ended up writing quite a few entrance exams, for the law schools, and I was lucky enough to get in. And I got into NLS Bangalore, and that's how I embarked on the path of becoming a lawyer.
Right. And it must be a really interesting choice because there is always a tendency to, if we are a second generation or a third generation lawyer, especially coming from a litigation background, there's always a tendency of joining the litigation chamber itself. But you've made
Yeah.
a very particular choice of moving towards technology law. As you say, you were always in love with technology. But then you've decided to work in multiple jurisdictions. You have an experience encompassing multiple jurisdictions. What was that experience like when it comes to the professional front and the personal front as well?
Sure. So I actually began my career in the UK. So I graduated from law school in India, but my first job was overseas in London with a big UK law firm.
Mhm.
And looking back at it, honestly, my main motivation was much more personal than professional.
Okay.
I'd never lived overseas. I
Mhm.
grew up completely in India, did my studies in India,
Mhm.
and I was very very keen to experience what it's like living overseas.
Mhm.
What is the world like? Outside India. I
Mhm.
wasn't very exposed, to anything beyond India at that point when I graduated from my undergrad law degree. So I was fortunate that I had this great opportunity to start my career overseas,
Mhm.
and so that was a great experience. And so not only did I get the chance to work in London, um, I also got the chance to do an overseas secondment to Brazil. Now, Brazil is a country that I've always had a very deep personal interest in. I'm very very much into music. That's
Okay.
my first love. Music is
Okay.
my first love, and uh, when I was studying law,
Mhm.
I discovered Brazilian music, and that was the soundtrack to 2 or 3 years of my law school career. Was I just really got very deeply into Brazilian music, and of course, growing up watching football, you everyone knows the Brazil football team, so it's a very iconic country. From a popular culture standpoint. So I was always very deeply interested in Brazil. So when I started my first job in London, one of my very very key goals was I wanted to get the chance to go to Brazil on secondment. I wasn't interested in going anywhere else, and mind you, these big law firms have offices everywhere across the world. But I had a single-minded focus that I just wanted to go to Brazil, and I was fortunate that I got the chance to go there for 6 months, and I loved every minute of that experience. And of course, I loved the London part of my experience as well. It was I got everything I wanted in terms of seeing the world, going overseas, traveling a lot, doing a lot of personal travel whenever the opportunity came up. Working at a law firm is very busy, as you know. So, but whenever I got the chance, I traveled overseas. I saw a lot of different countries. So on the personal front, that was a very very fulfilling experience. Uh, looking back, on the professional front, perhaps it was less fulfilling because I worked in a law firm which was very much specialized in banking and financial services, which is something that I was not passionate about. I wasn't passionate about the industry. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
the work wasn't always something that I found interesting.
Okay.
Um, Now, let me caveat that by saying the way that London law firms structure your 2-year training contract, which is what I did.
Mm-hmm.
I did a 2-year training contract. Every 6 months, you rotate through different practice areas. So in 2 years, you complete a total
Okay.
of 4 practice areas. Now, in my case, one of those 6-month blocks
Mm-hmm.
was taken up by my secondment, which was my priority number one.
Okay.
But other than that, I got the chance to work in, of course,
Mm-hmm.
banking and finance related one of the practice teams that focuses on that. I also did communications, media, and technology, which is, I think, the closest experience I had to what I'm currently doing in that first job that I had. Although, of course, qualitatively it was quite different. It wasn't the kind I wasn't dealing with the kind of legal issues that a company like Twitter deals with. It was very, very different from what I'm doing right now. But thematically, I think that is the closest I got to doing something technology related in my first job. And I also did 6 months in real estate. Now, it wasn't my first choice.
Okay.
You have to give them your
Yeah.
list of preferences. So real estate, I
Mm-hmm.
had given, I think, as my third or fourth, basically my last or second last
Okay.
preference.
Okay.
And it wasn't something that I was keen to do. When I got when I found out where I was going next, and I saw real estate, my first reaction
Mm-hmm.
was of disappointment.
Okay.
But having said
Mm-hmm.
that, I think except for my secondment, I think that is the seat that I probably enjoyed the most. And I wasn't
Okay.
expecting to enjoy it at all. Commercial
Okay.
real estate is something that I didn't know anything about. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know what I was getting into. I didn't know what the day-to-day work would be like. I was given it, frankly, even though it was my last choice. But I went in with an open mind and I actually really, really enjoyed the practice. I haven't actually worked in real estate after that 6-month period, but it was an eye-opening experience for me, something that I wasn't expecting to be interested in, something I'd never read up about or been interested in as an area of practice. I actually ended up enjoying it quite well. So that was a fortunate,
Mm-hmm.
a happy, serendipitous, I would say, piece of work experience that I had.
Right.
And so that's how I spent my first job,
Mm-hmm.
basically, my training contract. But the reality is that all along my
Mm-hmm.
heart had been in technology, and when I say my heart has always been in technology, I'm going back to when I was
Mm-hmm.
a young child. So that never left. And when I
Okay.
was doing my undergrad law degree, I had become interested in law and technology issues. And back
Okay.
then, mid two
Mm-hmm.
thousands, open source was hot button topic for lawyers who are interested in technology. Uh, so that's how that was my initial the way I dipped my toes into the area of law and technology. The other thing that happened in NLS, which I was very fortunate to be a part of, is that we started a law and technology journal, which is still going strong, the Indian Journal of Law and Technology, IJLT. So I served on the editorial board of IJLT for, I think, 3 years in total. And my last year, I was the chief editor of the journal as well. So that was another way that I was able to get exposure to the contemporary scholarship in law and technology issues. So this focus on technology is something that I'd always maintained. And as I said, in my first job as well, I did a 6-month rotation in communications, media, and technology. So it was always there, but I wanted to really, really dive into it head first. And
Mm-hmm.
again, when I was doing my undergrad, I started reading up about LLM programs and especially the LLM program that I ended up getting admitted into, which is the Law Science and Technology program at Stanford Law School. Which these are all coincidences. It had a minimum work experience requirement of 2 years. So you had to have a minimum of 2 years work experience to get into the law science and technology LLM program at Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
And it so happened that my training contract was exactly 2 years long.
Wow.
So I did that, and it gave me the minimum amount of work experience that I needed to get into this program.
Mm-hmm.
So I applied when I was in my third or fourth seat, and I was lucky enough to get admission to the LLM program that was my number one choice.
Okay.
And that is when I say that my career really started. That's when I finally was able to full time only work on, well, first study and then work on what I've been wanting to do all along, which is uh, legal
Technology law.
practice in the technology industry. Exactly.
Right, right. I mean, there is so much to unpack from just this segment of this conversation. I think this could be a proper episode for this podcast. But I'm really sorry, I got fixated on Brazilian football, and I think if I just delve into that, this entire episode would get derailed. But surely, I would hope that we have a conversation on the real Ronaldo issue that we have. Either way, so the question now here is that you finally found your love with technology law, and then you've discovered the various aspects and the unlimited opportunities that are now available, and now that you have achieved so much. But when it comes to the conceptual understanding of this particular field, a certain sense of specialization that is involved, what how would you conceptualize technology law and this entire field, and what all is it that it encapsulates overall?
Yeah, yeah. So it's a great question. My own view on this is that the term itself has been diluted over time to, at in 2021, say, technology law doesn't really mean anything very specific anymore. I mean, uh, you have people who, within the broad sort of technology, the broad heading of technology, are super specialized in it could be telecom, it could be social media issues, the kind of issues that I deal with. It could be something in life sciences. It could be something in emerging technologies like electric vehicles. It could be purely technological developments, like there are all these new emerging technologies, cryptocurrency. Um, so technology law now, I feel, doesn't by itself, the term really doesn't tell you very much. So you're absolutely right that it sounds like a specialization, but when you actually examine it closely, it's just a very broad catch-all term for a huge number of sub-specializations that have emerged over the last decade or so. So for students who are interested in getting into the technology industry, they will also need to think about which specific part of the technology industry that they're interested in, because it's a universe unto itself. Just like financial services now, it's such a diverse
Right.
field. So technology, I would say now is more or less the same in terms of there being so many different sub-specializations that you can build a you can build a decades long legal career in any one of these. So the decision is a very difficult decision because there are so many different paths that you can take. So you need to think about what you're most passionate about. What is the area of technology that captures your own imagination, that where do you see the future of the world going, in what direction, and what technologies do you think are going to shape the direction that the future of the world takes. For someone it could be genomics, for someone it could be electric vehicles, for someone it could be an internet based technology. So so you I think for students who are getting into technology in the technology industry now, and law students in particular, um, it's there's no better time to be thinking about entering the industry now, because the choices you have are so much more than uh, at any time
Right.
before, including when I started my career.
Right, right. Because you're absolutely right. Technology law, as it seems to us from a very limited perspective, obviously, is that it's so huge and there are so many aspects involved in this. We often wonder, like when it comes to the essential characteristics or the level of expertise that is required, do we just try and learn more and more about IPR, or do we learn more and more about AI, or is it any other
Yeah,
particular issue? So on a general note, for any student who's trying to build an acumen for technology law, or trying to
yeah,
have a better upscaling for technology law, what are those
yeah.
essential characteristics that you would suggest that we should work on in order to become better at technology law, or a better candidate for technology law?
Got it. So speaking from my own perspective and my own work profile, uh, my my view on this is that, number one, don't neglect any area of studies, because at some level or the other, general skills are very relevant and very necessary. So, for example, I said I've never really done much litigation. I did a few internships in law school, but that was about it. And yet, when I joined Twitter, I suddenly found myself with a big, litigation portfolio that I had to manage. So I had to learn how to do that very quickly. So don't neglect anything specifically. We all have our likes and dislikes. I was very passionate in law school about intellectual property. I also had a lot of subjects that I didn't care for at all. Family law was my weakest subject and the subject that I hated the most. Uh, I'm fortunate that I haven't had to deal too much with family law issues, in my career. But other than very very specific areas which you may not think are very relevant, I think generally pay attention to whatever you're learning. I think the fact that in the 5-year law degree there are so many compulsory courses, it's a blessing and a curse. It's a curse because you do end up having to study things that you're not very interested in, and many of those areas may eventually not be very relevant to your career path. But having said that, be as engaged as possible, absorb as much information as you can. You are in a very fortunate position of being able to study so many different legal sub-disciplines. So it's you should make the most of it, and not neglect anything because you don't find it that interesting.
Right.
Now, coming more specifically to technology, there aren't that many compulsory courses that I remember being directly relevant. Intellectual property is definitely one. It's a very, very important foundational subject. So
Right.
I think that's something that every law student will have the chance to study. And you must, if you're interested in technology, you must take that chance because that is relevant in all the different technological disciplines. Beyond that, I think depending on which law school you're attending, when it comes time to choose your elective courses in my case, it was the fifth year. I guess it's still the same. That fifth year is primarily where the electives your credit for credit electives happen. But
Yes.
even before that, we used to have 1 credit courses that were open to students even below fifth year. So I think that is really when you get the chance to study something that's very very specific. Um, and it does depend on what electives are being offered, what 1 credit type courses are being offered, other kinds of optional courses that are being offered. But keep your ear to the ground, and whenever a course is offered that you think is relevant to your specific interest in technology, that's definitely a great learning opportunity, and it's something that you should take with both hands. The other thing that I personally benefited a lot from was research and writing experience. As I said, I was on Law and Technology Journal, but in addition to that, I also did as much writing as I could on the technological issues of the day when I was a law student, and tried to get as much of my work published as possible. So I think research and writing is another, and that's completely in your own hands. You don't have to be, you're not dependent on a specific course being offered. That's totally up to you, right? Think about interesting legal issues. Identify journals where you can potentially have your work published, and then whenever you have free time, work on articles analyzing some original aspect that hasn't been worked on at all before, and so you have something new to contribute. You have something new and fresh to say, and that's something that you can start doing that pretty early on in your law school career. Maybe even in your first year, but certainly second, third year onwards. That's definitely a possibility, and I benefited a lot from that myself. So I would encourage anyone else who's interested in technology to focus on research and writing as well.
Absolutely. And I truly believe that there is a trend or sort of an awareness that is going around, especially what I witness on LinkedIn, to say the least, is there are a lot of technology law journals and technology law blogs that are dedicated to this discipline particularly, and which are surfacing more and more as we speak. So, but again, there is one particular fear or sort of a reservation that law students would face is that technology law in itself sounds very exclusive, and there is one fear that we might not be equipped with the skills required to excel in technology law. As in, should we be aware of the science or the scientific facts, or should we have a scientific background, or should we have a technological background, or if I'm a humanities student, would I be able to understand technology law or not? So is there any particular set of skills that law students in general can master in order to become better receptive of technology law?
Yeah, this is a great question. It's something that I've also encountered in my own career. Um, in India, I think we have the disadvantage that we are basically at age 18. We are taking a pretty significant decision about our career path, right? At 17, 18, when you're getting out of school, you are choosing to study law as an undergraduate degree. Of course, I'm not trying to discount the 3-year law degrees, which are still very much around. But these days, the 5-year degree is I guess the
Yeah.
one that most students are studying.
Yes.
So you're taking that decision, and there's an opportunity cost in that decision, because by saying that I'm going to study law from age 18 onwards, you are foregoing the opportunity to study other things, including technical things, including computer science, or at an undergraduate level, engineering, biology. There's so many other fields that we are giving up in order to study law. So that's just, I think that is a structural uh, fact. There's not too much that we can do about that, because that is how legal education works. But you can certainly, that being the case, there are many things that you can do to, improve your technical knowledge. These days, thanks to Coursera and
Okay.
all the other websites, you can study so many. You can learn coding, on the weekends,
Right.
at weeknights. So there are a lot of opportunities to study non-legal subjects, even while you're pursuing your law degree, even while you're working. So that's definitely something that you should explore if you're so inclined. But coming back to the question as you framed it, the reality is that I personally don't think that you need to have a technical background
Okay.
in order to be a technology lawyer. I think familiarity with technology certainly helps. I think if you can pick up technical skills along the way, if you can learn some basic coding, these are going to be huge, huge advantages. So you should definitely pursue these options if you have the opportunity to do so. But are they necessary? No, I don't think that these things are necessary. When I was studying for my master's
Right.
at Stanford, I had a great professor called Professor Rob Merges,
Okay.
and and he taught patent law.
Okay.
Um, and one of the first things he told us in one of the introductory, probably the first class that we had with him on patent law, he said, people come up to me and say, do you have to be an engineer in order to be a good patent lawyer? And he said the reality is you don't have to be an engineer. You don't have to have a technical training at all. What you do need to have is an open mind and a willingness to figure things out. Those
Right.
are much greater
Wonderful.
determinants of becoming a successful patent lawyer, rather than having a technical background. And I find myself going back to this advice, not just, I mean, I not just in the context of patents, but whenever I'm confronted with a new kind of legal issue that I don't have experience working with, or I don't have something that's coming to me for the first time, I always go back to this. If you can approach this with an open mind, a willingness to figure things out, then you can eventually, your legal training should help you to not only figure the issue out from a practical perspective, but also ultimately give legal advice on that issue, which
Right.
is how we earn our living, basically.
Right, right. And that is so inspiring on so many levels, because when I started this podcast, I had absolutely no idea of the distributorship. And this is a very, very stupid, sort of a novice example that I'm quoting here, is because I had no idea how to get on a website or have your distribution or anything. But as in when I studied more and more about it, researched more about it, it's really not that complicated. But it's the effort, as you say, it is the willingness to acquire the information and the open mindedness that is required, which is absolutely true. I think this is something that I also need to apply for myself. I'll be going through this conversation again to hear that quote again and perhaps apply that as much as I can. But as a part of my last set of questions for you, sir, is obviously about your current position as a senior legal counsel working for Twitter. what exactly is your experience like? What are the various areas in technology law and litigation that you have to face and you have to work with? And how is this sort of adding to your professional front? And what advice would you give to the fresh aspirants who are trying to follow your footsteps?
Sure. So Twitter is a relatively small company. Certainly relative to our peer companies in the social media space, we are quite small. And so, being a lawyer at Twitter, what that means is that I do end up being a generalist. So when I first joined the company, my portfolio consisted of, you know, I would say I spent maybe one third of my time on litigation.
Right.
I spent one third of my time on commercial legal issues. So, Twitter is not only is it a social media platform where users interact with each other, but it's also an advertising platform where advertisers serve ads to those users. So the commercial part of my work, focuses on supporting our commercial business, which primarily includes ads, but there are many other business lines that I support. What does that mean? It means that I participate in the drafting and negotiating of contracts for all of our different business lines. And then one third, I think, is the remaining one third is a grab bag. It could be anything. One day you could have to deal with an HR issue. One day you could have to deal with, a new product that has privacy, data protection implications. You have to deal with intellectual property issues quite regularly. So this is where I keep saying that you have to be prepared for anything. You never know what's going to cross your desk. You never know what email you're going to get. You never know what Slack message you're going to get, and you'll be expected to give meaningful, actionable legal advice on something that you wouldn't have predicted when you woke up that morning. So I think that open-mindedness and just willingness to read things, try and understand them, do some more research, talk to people who know the product or the technology better than you, and synthesize all of that and come up with meaningful, actionable, well-grounded legal advice. I think that's the skill that for someone in my with my job profile, I'm always working towards being better at this skill. Just synthesizing information, and the law is always far behind technology. Like, law moves at a glacial pace compared to technology. So the other
Okay.
thing you have to contend with is that, fine, you understood the product, you've understood the problem, but the law is still you're still looking at a 15-20 year old act. In the
Yeah.
best case, I mean, in the worst
Right.
case, you may be looking at an act that's more than 100 years old. That also
Right.
happens to me. But then you have to figure out where uh, how you can extrapolate what the law says, and how does it apply to the technology that you're looking at. Now, the Indian Telegraph Act of 1885, there was no Twitter, there was no internet in 1885,
Right.
but it's still a law on the books. So how do
Wow.
you apply the concepts that are laid out in that law to the technology that's in front of you, which is the 21st century technology? So this is all very general. I'm keeping it very abstract, but the reality is that this is daily life as a lawyer in a technology company. You do have to figure out how your product fits within existing law, and the existing law may not contemplate your product at all. So getting better at figuring that process out is what I'm always working towards. And one difference between and I before this role I was in private practice, and I think one big difference between private practice and working in house at a company is when you're in private practice, you can actually afford to hedge your advice quite a lot. You can put in a lot of assumptions, you can put in a lot of qualifications, you can put in a lot of it depends. But as an in-house lawyer, you don't have that luxury. Ultimately, you have to take a decision, and then you have to stand by that decision because you're responsible for it. That broadly, I would say, is what I see as the important skill set to. And you're never going to you're never going to sit back and say, okay, it's done. I've learned everything. I've mastered it. You're never going to master it. But you should always try and this applies to myself as much as anyone else. Always try and make sure that every day you learn a little bit more than what you knew the previous day. You become a little bit more. You improve your communication. You know your product better every day. Know your company better every day, and just always try and work towards improving constantly day by day.
I think that is absolutely wonderful. So, to know more about this role that not a lot of law students are actually aware of, or perhaps this is not a conversation that we have quite regularly. Obviously, we have a lot of conversations about disputes and this and that, and obviously, there are various legal fields that we are open to having conversations about. But this is for me on this podcast the first time I'm having a conversation about technology law and someone who's working with technology law in an in house role, working for a company like Twitter, and to know from your own personal experience how is it like and how the evolution really works for a lawyer. It was truly wonderful. Honestly, I am truly grateful for this opportunity, sir. Before we wrap this conversation up, do you have any closing remarks for our viewers?
Uh, in terms of closing remarks, I firstly want to thank you for inviting me on the show. I also greatly enjoyed this conversation. It's a real privilege to be on your show.
Thank you, sir.
And I think it's a great idea that you're doing this. You're having these conversations with practitioners in different fields. So it's a wonderful project, and I wish you every success going forward with this project.
Thank you.
And for users, for your subscribers, viewers who may be interested in learning more,
Mhm.
you can follow me on Twitter. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have any questions. And similarly, if you're interested in some other uh, technological subfield, do try and see if you can find individuals online who are working in the area that you're interested in. Reach out to them, and hopefully many of them will be willing to share their experience and their expertise. And that's it. So thanks for having me on the show, Kostab. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much, sir. It was truly an honor, in fact, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you as soon as possible again. Thank you so much.